When it comes to customer service, personalization really matters. From simplifying what information customers need to provide, to tailoring offers based on their history and preferences, personalization has benefits for both sides of the interaction. I'm Greg Thomas, Senior Director of Thought Leadership here at Genesys, and today on the Green Room, I'm joined by Tom Lewis of TTEC Digital, and we're going to discuss what's next for personalization in CX and how to make the most of it in your efforts. Tom, welcome to the Green Room.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks for having me.
So why don't we just start with a softball? Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background in TTEC Digital.
Good, something I know something about. So I spent most of my career in management consulting, although I was also the CEO of a software company that was started as an AI research company. But I've dedicated my career essentially to customer experience, almost everything we do. And so I am the leader of the consulting, analytics, and AI practice at TTEC Digital. It's a CX advisory and technology company.
Wonderful. So before we dive into maybe some of the benefits of personalization and how folks are using it, I gave a couple examples in the intro, but it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. It can manifest in a lot of different ways. How do you think about it? How do you define personalization to help guide the rest of this conversation?
Yeah, so let me start with the framework of inside out or outside in. So if you're starting from the inside and trying to look at how you personalize for a customer, you might think of things such as next best offer and sort of sales and that sort of thing. So you're personalizing what you're offering the customer. That's fine, and that is one path for sure, and the capabilities and the technology are certainly there to do that. The outside in view, however, speaks more volumes around the way the consumer behaves in terms of reacting to your brand, reacting to your offers, but reacting to you and their endearment essentially to it based on the fact that you know who they are. And so when a consumer is engaging with a brand and the first thing they hear is offers or options, let's say in an IVR, that don't pertain to the products and services they have at all, that's not personalization. Whereas if you authenticate inside a chatbot or an IVR, or you've already logged in into a website and you're in the chatbot, and it's offering you things that are completely tailored to your relationship with the brand, that's what I refer to as personalization.
Yeah, and so that kind of relevance is really a big part of it. So we do a lot of research here at Genesys, and we have found that 81% of consumers say they would purchase more from a brand when they get those personalized offers and personalized experiences. But in that same survey, only about 35% of CX leaders say that they're truly delivering on those kinds of personalized experiences.
Yeah.
How do you think about the disconnect? What's behind that?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of different dimensions. First of all, relative to the survey results that you're speaking to, I think it's very consistent across the board over the last several years around that. So that's one thing. The second is a lot of the CX leaders that are talking about that 30-some-odd% of the work that they're doing to personalize is often very much around the next best offer and sort of the selling kind of it. It's not the outside-in part of the conversation. And so the reason is because it's complex, it's hard, technology is evolving and making it more, approachable, more able to deliver for clients now based on the technology capabilities. That wasn't always the case, and I think that pace of change is going to accelerate. But the disconnect there is very much that the consumer is saying, "Do you know me?" And the CX leader is saying, "I know how to sell to you," which are not exactly the same kind of thing.
And that framing that you've got of inside out and outside in, like that can be endemic in how companies think about their customers. Let us tell you what we think you want to know, as opposed to let's really understand where you're coming from and meet you where you are.
Yep.
So we're at Genesys Experience, all about the customer experience, and personalization can happen all across a customer's journey. Why do you think it's so valuable to the customer for personalization to be delivered in those service interactions?
I think there's several dimensions to it. Part of it is this idea that if you already know who I am, then I'm going to spend less effort, less mental calories getting accomplished whatever it is I need to get done with the brand. The fact of the matter is, if I can figure out how not to call customer service, I'm probably not going to call customer service. But if I have to, I've then sort of crossed over this threshold that I'm now spending effort. It's not frictionless, I'm hitting friction, and I get into the this dread sometimes of going through IVR trees that lead to IVR trees and chatbots that offer you, options that have nothing to do with the page you're on, let alone your relationship with the company. And so that amount of reducing the friction in that journey is a key piece of it. The other is that there is value to be enhanced in that relationship. And so when you buy something, if you're buying a $5 product, that's probably something that's, you're less committed to per se. But you're buying a very expensive product, you want affirmation that you made the right choice. And so an enhancement to the value that the brand brings to you, and having that affirmation says, well, I spent a lot of money on you, I did a lot of research on you, I bought your product, and you don't even know who I am. And so that's sort of the disconnect that I don't think is received very well.
Yeah, and on that last point, there's been a lot of research done that oftentimes after someone makes a purchase, they go and do additional reading about it online for that kind of confirmation bias. I made the right choice. Yep. And so whether it's a big ticket item, as you were talking about, or lifetime value with a brand, getting that kind of affirmation back that you value me, it's really important in terms of their willingness to continue being a customer.
100%, and even Gartner has a metric around that. It's called the Value Enhancement Score, and it's really, trying to repeat that element of the affirmation. You can't execute against that unless you've done a few other things before then, but that's the general principle.
Yeah. So to your first point, though, about the frictionlessness of, or reducing the friction in receiving customer experience, not having to authenticate the company knowing who I am, you've talked about this idea of reducing customer effort through personalization. So you talked about that a little bit in that previous exchange, but walk us through that and why that's so important, both from the organizational perspective, but also from the customer's experience.
Yeah, I think the idea that you want to make it easy for your customer to get done what they want to get done is intuitive. Although it's not my research necessarily, it's if you haven't read the book around the effortless experience by Matt Dixon and the Corporate Executive Board, their premise, in I would say about 2012 or so, is that customers choose the channel they choose to interact with you based on which one they think is going to take the least amount of effort to get something done. So it's not that they don't like chatbots and they don't like IVRs, it's that their assessment is this is more effort than just talking to a human. And then you talked about the research or the validation both post-sale, and then obviously many people I would presume do that beforehand. And so the idea that you've done that research and then you engage with a human after you've gone through the IVR or after you've gone through the chatbot, and then you're starting over again. And so they can't possibly know that you've been doing research on Google necessarily, but they should know where you are on the website, where your journey, where your product, and so forth. But then the next level of frustration or lack of friction removal is that you've done all this research, you're talking to an agent who hasn't perhaps, and doesn't even, isn't starting at the same place you are. And so an incremental amount of friction and frustration comes into play. And that's where you start to hear, particularly during COVID, where, customer service agents were, I feel like almost under attack by some customers because there was, all this frustration. And so, you can look at the consumer and say, you need to behave differently. Okay, fine, you're going to, good luck with that. Hopefully, culturally, that will improve over time. But you look at the brand specifically and say, again, from an outside-in perspective, what am I doing to make it easy for my customers to buy from me, and then when they need service, that they can get to it. And if it's viewed as a cost center, then you're not going to have that same mentality. And so the idea is that you listed some, sort of performance stats, and there is evidence that shows that the increase in lifetime value, the propensity to repurchase, et cetera, are enhanced by a combination of the personalization we talked at the beginning of the conversation, as well as just reducing friction and making it easy. So even if I do have to call, it's a short conversation.
Yeah, and I think we've all had that kind of experience, right, where I've got 15 minutes before my next thing, and I need to talk to my doctor, my insurance company, my bank, whatever it is, and there's that low key feeling of dread, can I really get this done in the time that I have? Is it going to be sufficiently frictionless, even if it's not completely frictionless? And so anything that can be done to lessen that, and if you deliver that experience on that interaction, then next time I'm not going to think, I've got 15 minutes, can I get it done? I'm going to think, I got 15 minutes, I can totally get this done.
Yep.
So what's holding the industry back from delivering this kind of personalization at scale and in all the touch points and places that it should be delivered?
Yeah. So two parts. One is an answer, or sort of a comment on the last thing you said around the, oh, do I have 15 minutes to get something done? Back to that value enhancement. The idea might be also that during that first call, the agent might be in a position to say, next time you have this issue, let me show you how you can self-solve and things like that. And so while that does take time and average handle time and things like that, you just reduced or increased your performance around first contact resolution. But that is a strategy as well as the enabling technology. And so your question was, what's holding companies back? And as I said at the top, it is hard to implement all these things. And the technology is changing, and to some degree, operational executives are a little overwhelmed by making what decisions do I have? We're moving to the cloud. There's 55 different SaaS companies that all want to sell me something, and prioritizing around that. So, and there's cost associated with that. So it's not necessarily cheap. The question is, does the expense on technology outweigh things like the frustration you have at hiring and retaining good people? And you fix the technology problem once, you have to perpetually fix the hiring problem. And so cost is clearly one of them. The other is having a good roadmap. And on the one hand, organizations very often sort of boil the ocean around the roadmap. Roadmaps used to be 3 to 5 years kind of thing. Technology's changing fast enough. This should be, what is in your 18-month window and what is achievable within your management plan.
A more agile approach.
It's definitely more agile.
Out.
That's exactly right. It's a good way to say it.
So you touched on this a little bit in that answer, but I know in previous conversations we've had, you've talked about how the thinking around the contact center customer experience, like the way it's measured and thinking about the return on investment and moving to really a value driver is part of this. That this does enhance customer lifetime value, it enhances your brand reputation, it does all these things. How do you feel that sort of evolution to thinking about this more as something in which you as an organization invest and you get a return on it over time? Like, how's that going?
Yeah, there's lots of ways to sort of cut that one, but one area where I think is really evolving and very interesting, and as an advent of the Gen AI technology advancements, is you have all of these conversations, all these interactions with customers. Technically, it's a treasure trove of information and insight, but yet it's always been fairly hard to harvest. You have speech analytics, and traditionally that did well, but you now have this conversational analytics that really can show you depth and breadth in all of the conversations. During the keynote, they showed spider diagrams of how the conversation flowed and things like that. That's a piece of it, but the other side is that generally speaks to what I'll call operational improvement and customer insight, related to that. But you also now have an opportunity, if you have a stakeholder in the business around product or sales or marketing or operations, and you said, if I could tell you the highlights around what every single one of our customers said, specifically around this product and this feature in that product, would that be interesting to you? And the idea to harness that kind of insight would be great. And so there's an additional component here. It's not just the effortless and the friction and the outside in, but it's now, you're still going to end up with a contact center for quite some time to come. Let's harvest that very valuable asset. And one way to do that also is to make sure that the contact center leadership has a seat at the table that's not viewed as a cost center, but actually sort of the crown jewels of the organization from an insight perspective.
Yeah, and to pick up on one of the things that you said in there, there's so much hype around AI, and it is a transformative technology, and it's more than one transformative technology, but that ability to unlock that knowledge that's been sitting there for a long time, whether, like you said, it's in the call transcripts, whether it's in knowledge bases and spread across documents and whatnot, to really point something at that and pull the benefit out, and then do that kind of like walking around that retail, sort of salesmanship within your organization. Hey, this is what customers are actually asking about. This is not working, that is not working. That's pretty valuable, and really does, if that seat at the table for the contact center doesn't exist, it's a way to earn it.
It is. And I think helping the organization understand the transformation that your organization is, your contact center customer support organization is going through, starting that conversation early and now, because the pace of change is only going to accelerate, and to getting the rest of the organization on board in relative to how it's going to impact your customers and what value can be brought into the rest of the organization.
So that's a good tee up to my next question. So things are moving really fast. They're probably going to accelerate. If you look, say, a year or 18 months out, where do you think personalization, or how do you think personalization is going to evolve? And for those who are watching and thinking, what do I need to be sort of planning for in the conversations I need to be having, what advice would you give them?
So I think one way to think about it is that the time it takes to implement some of these specific technologies is reducing fairly significantly, which means that the ROI to actually go off and implement them is also improving. And so there should be a motion around, you spend all this time around training and process improvement and hiring, retaining, sort of the operational mechanics piece of it. But that some piece of that investment in the continuous improvement and the continuous personalization, continuous process improvement from a customer outside-in viewpoint is part of the, I think another thread that needs to be, because what's going to happen also is that the nature of the tier one agent is going to change. Like in the next 3 to 5 years, I think you said 18 months, but give me a little more runway.
We'll give you the runway, yeah.
And the tier one agent is going to significantly change, because a lot of that will be able to be handled by automation, and people won't hate it because it sucks. They'll actually do it because they actually think it's the quicker channel. So I think we are getting there. But the converse of that is that you're going to need knowledge workers who have the skill to continuously improve and to tune and to improve that. So it's like, supervisors improving the work that the robots are doing, for lack of a better word. It's a little scary to talk about robots in that capacity. I don't know that the cost for the contact center necessarily is going to go down, but what will go up or improve is the efficiency, personalization, customer experience, reduction in fraud, reduction in error, improvement in all the. So it's definitely. In the short term anyway, the overall budget, you wouldn't look at that and say it's going to go away. And the same is true for outsourcers, for that matter. I think there's tier one outsourcers, or tier one agents, if that's all they're doing, then yeah, that's probably at more jeopardy versus ones that are today handling very sophisticated calls.
Yeah. But you touched on a lot of business outcomes and business metrics in that, right? And that's part of that shift, that this is a customer experience is something that really is driving those business value and business outcomes for folks. Right. And so, well, we've come to the end of our time here on the Green Room. And as a token of our thanks for being here, we've got a set of branded Genesis orange and blue M&Ms for you to enjoy yourself, enjoy with your family.
Good.
Thank you, Tom, for being here.
Thank you, Greg.
I'm Greg Thomas. Thanks for joining us again here on the CX Green Room today. We've been chatting with Tom Lewis from TTEC Digital, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.